I'm Olivia, and I was 28 years old that evening when my mom transformed my grandmother's precious gift into nothing more than dinner table entertainment. We were midway through our meal when she put down her utensils, reclined in her chair with the confidence of royalty about to make a grand declaration, and shot me a smug look from her side of the table. "Oh, I almost forgot to mention," she announced in a voice loud enough to draw everyone's attention, acting as though it was just some trivial afterthought. Quote 1. For a split second, I wondered if I'd somehow misunderstood what she'd just said. My teeth clenched involuntarily, but I absolutely refused to let her see any kind of emotional response. Before I could even form a response, my stepdad burst into laughter and slapped his palms together enthusiastically. He declared triumphantly, as if this were some kind of team accomplishment worth celebrating. My mother soaked up the praise, going on about how she'd cleverly converted a dusty old family relic into $13,500. She boasted about her negotiation skills and suggested that my grandmother would be so proud if she could witness the sparkling new automobile parked in our driveway. Each word felt like a blade cutting through me. That jewelry represented far more than precious metals and gemstones. It embodied the final promise my grandmother had ever made to me, a fragment of our family's heritage that she'd entrusted me to preserve. And now my mother sat there, actually laughing about liquidating it without so much as consulting me first. I remained motionless, maintaining a completely neutral expression, while something cold and razor-sharp took root deep inside my chest. If my own mother was capable of converting my inheritance into cash just for applause during a family dinner, what other things might she be willing to sacrifice? And when the reality of that transaction eventually came crashing down, would it destroy only her, or would it take all of us down with it? You've just heard about my mother bragging how she sold off my inheritance to buy a car, but you haven't witnessed what happens when that supposedly brilliant decision completely backfires. The angry call from the buyer, the hidden email correspondence, the audio evidence, the legal action that followed. Stick around until the conclusion to discover just how far I had to go to reclaim what rightfully belonged to me and ensure she paid a price for treating her own daughter's legacy like merchandise. The following morning, my phone began buzzing before I'd even poured my first cup of coffee. The number was unfamiliar, so I nearly sent it straight to voicemail, but some instinct urged me to answer it. "Is this Olivia?" A male voice demanded immediately upon connection. "I need some answers about what kind of scheme your family is running on me." My grip tightened around the device. "Who exactly is calling?" "I'm the person who purchased your jewelry collection," he practically yelled. "The emerald pieces. Your mother guaranteed me that everyone in the family had approved the transaction, and now I'm discovering that's completely false. Do you have any concept of the legal nightmare I could get dragged into if these items were actually stolen goods?" The room seemed to tilt momentarily. "I never approved a single thing," I managed to respond. "That jewelry was specifically willed to me. I only discovered she'd sold it yesterday evening." There was a moment of shocked silence from his end, followed by an angry curse word. "Then she deliberately lied to me in documented communications. I'm forwarding you a copy of the sales agreement and her email messages. There's a 7-day cancellation provision if there was any misrepresentation involved. I'm not taking the fall for her dishonesty." When those documents arrived in my email, my stomach dropped. On the contract, under the ownership section, my mother had selected sole owner and typed my name on a line stating, "My daughter Olivia has consented to this sale." She'd even attempted to forge a signature that resembled my handwriting, though sloppily executed. And there it was, buried in the contract's detailed terms. The purchaser could void the agreement within 7 days if the seller had falsely represented their ownership rights. We were currently on day 2. A slow, calculated determination washed over me. This hadn't been some impulsive heat of the moment blunder at the dinner table. The email correspondence stretched back 3 full months. I knew all her passwords. She always used the same pet's name combined with the same number sequence. I accessed her email account, my hands completely steady, not trembling at all. Message after message revealed the identical narrative. Her joking about playing the devoted mother role while secretly cashing in on family heirlooms, sending photographs of my grandmother's handwritten note, and referring to it as, quote, 13 for her story. But what truly made my chest constrict was a bank account screenshot she'd transmitted to one of her friends. Only a portion of the $12,000 had actually gone toward the vehicle purchase. The remaining funds had been wired as a deposit to a cosmetic surgery facility and an exclusive weekend getaway resort. No mention whatsoever about supporting family expenses. She'd deceived him as well. My stepdad's text messages in her inbox were filled with concerns about finances and guilt over taking on an automobile payment. He had absolutely no idea that the jewelry sale had actually funded her secret cosmetic procedures and luxury vacation. She was manipulating every single one of us. In that precise moment, the betrayal transformed from an abstract concept into a documented timeline, a detailed strategy. This wasn't a stressed out mother making a regrettable decision under pressure. This was calculated and premeditated. If a betrayal has been meticulously orchestrated over several months, can it still be classified as a mistake? Or does it become a deliberate choice to inflict pain on the people who trust you most? Understanding the truth and actually proving it represent two completely different challenges. The buyer's documentation, the falsified consent form, the emails discussing her cunning scheme. They all carried weight, but my attorney wanted something even more concrete. When I contacted the estate lawyer's office and explained the entire situation, she listened without interrupting, then responded calmly. Quote 14. That marked the day I stopped simply reacting and began taking strategic action. I apologized to my mother during our next dinner together, told her I'd been overly dramatic about the whole situation, that I was making efforts to move forward. I complimented the new automobile. I inquired about how it felt to finally be driving something really nice. Her eyes sparkled, suspicion dissolving into smug satisfaction. You see? I told you this decision was for the best, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. You're finally maturing. What she remained completely unaware of was that my phone, positioned face down on the table right beside my dinner plate, was quietly capturing every word. I performed the role of the obedient daughter perfectly, asking questions about how she'd managed to negotiate such an excellent price, how she'd convinced the buyer so rapidly. She opened up like someone had turned on a faucet. Men like that absolutely love a compelling story, she explained. Single mother, ungrateful daughter who never appreciates the sacrifices made for her. Family heirloom just collecting dust in a box. He practically threw cash at me, she said with a small laugh. And the absolute best part? Watching your face when I broke the news to you. Gosh, the expression in your eyes. She trailed off, smiling to herself as if my shocked reaction had provided some kind of twisted amusement. Later that same week, I overheard her in the kitchen talking with her closest friend, so I activated the recording function again from my position in the hallway. Wait, you actually forged her signature on the document? Her friend whispered in disbelief. My mother scoffed dismissively. Please. She never does anything with those pieces anyway. And honestly, causing her a bit of pain is the only method that gets through to her. If she actually feels the consequences, she'll remember the lesson. My breath caught in my throat as she continued, her voice lowered but dripping with venom. My daughter believes sentimentality is a substitute for personality. I'll happily shatter that little fantasy for $13,500 any day of the week, She can shed tears over family legacy while I improve my appearance and take a weekend where nobody's constantly complaining about something. Hearing that statement felt exponentially worse than learning about the sale itself. This wasn't about financial desperation. This wasn't about survival. This was about deriving pleasure from causing harm. I transmitted both audio recordings to my attorney, along with the email messages and the sales contract. Her response arrived almost instantaneously. This is precisely the evidence we needed. I stared at my phone screen, my mother's voice echoing through my mind, bragging about how satisfying it felt to hurt me. When you're forced to secretly record your own mother just to prevent her from rewriting reality to suit her narrative, are you still functioning as her child? Or have you finally transformed into her adversary? The subsequent decision I made felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff. I decided to reveal everything to my stepdad. I waited until he arrived home from his job, alone, without the distinctive sound of her high heels clicking behind him. He tossed his keys into the bowl by the door, already discussing something about a client, until he noticed the expression on my face and stopped mid-sentence. "We need to have a serious conversation about that car," I said quietly. He frowned. "If this is still about what happened last week, your mom already explained—" "This isn't about last week," I interrupted firmly. "This is about how she actually financed the purchase." I displayed the emails for him, the forged line about my supposed consent, the bank screenshot showing the wire transfer to the cosmetic surgery clinic and resort booking. Then I played both audio recordings. The dinner conversation where she treated my inheritance like a punchline, and the kitchen conversation where she openly admitted to forging my name and stated that inflicting pain was her teaching method. I watched his facial expression gradually crumble, moving from confusion through disbelief to something resembling physical nausea. She specifically told me it belonged to her," he said, his voice hoarse. "She claimed her mother had given those pieces to her, that you didn't care about them at all. I assumed it was— I thought it was strictly between you two." "She lied to both of us," I stated plainly. "You laughed at that dinner table because you trusted what she told you." I sat there in complete silence because I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. He sank heavily into a chair, rubbing his face with both hands. "And the surgery expenses? The hotel booking? Her version of supporting the family." Apparently, for the first time since he'd become part of our lives, he appeared less like my mother's supportive partner and more like another person who'd been manipulated. He finally said, "Transmitting those files to him felt like choosing a side in a conflict and simultaneously realizing he might actually be aligned with mine." The second alliance emerged from a completely unexpected source: my grandmother, my mother's own mother. I'd always been informed she was too ill for visits. That complicated family drama had made things difficult. But inside the leather journal my grandmother had left along with the jewelry, there was a handwritten address and phone number. One afternoon, I drove out to the modest house written in her distinctive handwriting, my heart pounding as I walked up the pathway. The woman who answered the door appeared older and more fragile, but her eyes were sharp and remarkably familiar. Quote 35. She said softly, before I could even introduce myself. Inside, seated over cups of tea that neither of us actually drank, I explained everything. The sale, the forged consent, the angry buyer's phone call, the audio recordings. When I played my mother's voice bragging about shattering my fantasy and using my emotional pain as a teaching tool, my grandmother's hand began to tremble visibly. "She hasn't changed at all?" she whispered. "When she was younger, she stole her sister's entire college savings and blamed it on a supposed paperwork error. She pawned my wedding ring once and convinced everyone it had been lost during a move. We covered up for her behavior because we thought she'd eventually outgrow these tendencies." Tears welled up in her eyes, not just for my current situation, but for old wounds that had never properly healed. I specifically left those emerald pieces for you because I wanted one thing in this family that she couldn't manipulate or destroy. And she went ahead and did it anyway. I felt something release in my chest at those words. This wasn't merely about monetary value or gemstones. This was about multiple generations of people quietly repairing the damage that one individual repeatedly caused. Quote 39. I said firmly. Quote 40. My grandmother nodded slowly, determination hardening in her features. Quote 41. That evening, my lawyer proposed a strategic plan, a family gathering, framed as a memorial dinner honoring my grandmother's late husband, where the complete truth would be presented in front of witnesses, emails, audio recordings, the buyer's testimony, and my grandmother herself present to verify her intentions. If the relatives who'd always believed my mother's version of events finally witnessed what she was genuinely capable of, there would be no possibility of reversing course. When the people you always assumed would defend your mother quietly relocate their chairs to your side of the room, what does family even mean anymore? Bloodline connection, or the individuals who refuse to let you stand alone? We presented it as a straightforward family dinner to commemorate my grandfather's birthday. My mother enthusiastically embraced anything that positioned her as the center of attention, so she agreed immediately, already planning the menu and commenting on how wonderful it would be having everyone gathered together. She had absolutely no idea what was actually coming. The dining room gradually filled with relatives I hadn't encountered in years, an aunt who consistently took my mother's side in any dispute, cousins who believed every narrative she'd ever told them, and naturally, my stepdad, hovering quietly near the wall, his eyes revealing nothing. My grandmother arrived last. When my mother spotted her standing at the door, she froze momentarily, then forced a bright smile onto her face. Quote 42. She said, though there was a noticeable crack in her voice. Quote 43. My grandmother replied calmly. Quote 44. We proceeded through the typical motions initially. Small talk, clinking glasses, sharing memories about my grandfather. My mother seized every opportunity to present herself as the devoted daughter and loving mother. I allowed her to hold the spotlight, knowing I was moments away from taking it permanently away from her. After dessert was served, I stood up and cleared my throat audibly. I said. The atmosphere in the room shifted noticeably. My mother's smile tightened visibly. Olivia, this really isn't the appropriate time for— It's precisely the appropriate time, my grandmother interrupted, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it before. I placed a printed copy of the sales contract in the center of the table. I explained. Eyes scanned the document. Someone audibly gasped when they noticed my name written in handwriting that resembled mine, but wasn't quite accurate. I never signed anything, I continued. I never provided approval, and the buyer contacted me the following day, absolutely furious because he'd realized he'd been deliberately deceived. Before my mother could launch into her usual spin control tactics, I tapped my phone and allowed the first audio recording to play. Her voice filled the entire room, boasting about converting a dusty family heirloom into $13,500, mocking my shocked reaction, discussing how clever she'd been in the negotiation. Then came the second recording, the one captured from the kitchen conversation. The words hung in the air like toxic poison. Quote, 53, quote. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth in shock. One cousin stopped recording on her phone briefly, then started again, realizing she was capturing something significant. My mother's face went pale, then flushed red, then some color in between. She hissed. I said. My grandmother reached into her bag and extracted the leather journal that had initiated this entire situation. Quote 58. She said, flipping to the page where she'd explicitly written that the emerald pieces were intended for me and me exclusively. I left them to Olivia because I knew you'd take anything you could get your hands on. I just didn't anticipate you'd go to these extremes. My mother stammered something about financial stress and overwhelming bills, about being forced into making a difficult choice. That was when my stepdad spoke up, his voice steady but notably cold. Forced? He said. You specifically told me the jewelry belonged to you. You never mentioned anything about forgery. You never mentioned cosmetic surgery clinics or luxury resort bookings. You lied to me as well. Every pair of eyes at the table shifted to focus on her. The queen of the room suddenly found herself without a single supporter. On speakerphone, the buyer's voice cut through the tension. He had agreed to participate in the call at my lawyer's suggestion. He confirmed the misrepresentation, the forged consent documentation, the 7-day cancellation provision. I'm not protecting her, he stated flatly. If this proceeds to court, I'll provide testimony. My grandmother looked directly at my mother, pain and fury mingling in her gaze. From this day forward, you are no daughter of mine, she said quietly, but every person in the room heard it clearly. If you can sell your child's inheritance and actually laugh about the pain you've caused, you don't belong to this family. In that precise moment, my mother wasn't positioned as the victim of a misunderstanding or a misunderstood martyr. She was simply a woman sitting isolated at a table while everyone else gradually leaned away from her. Exposing your own mother in front of the entire extended family, when does it stop being justice and start resembling cruelty? Following the gathering, there was no possibility of pretending things could be repaired with an apology and a few tears. My lawyer moved swiftly. With the audio recordings, the contract, the buyer's cooperation, and my grandmother's written statement about her intentions, we possessed far more than just a family dispute. We had a clear-cut case of fraud, forgery, and conversion. The initial formal demand letter offered an exit route: return the jewelry, provide compensation for the damages, and we'd avoid court proceedings. My mother refused. She labeled it blackmail, accused me of trying to ruin her life, and insisted the entire family would eventually come to their senses. They didn't. When the lawsuit was officially filed, it wasn't just my name on the plaintiff line. The buyer joined the legal action, suing to rescind the sale and recover his money if the jewelry couldn't be returned. The court proceedings blurred together at times, but certain moments burned themselves into my memory. Watching my mother read her own emails aloud in court, forced to acknowledge she'd forged my consent. Hearing the judge question her about using the proceeds for elective surgery and luxury vacations after claiming urgent financial necessity. Witnessing her attorney physically flinch when the audio recordings played, echoing off the courtroom walls instead of our kitchen. In the end, the judicial decision was brutally straightforward. The judge voided the sale completely, ordered the jewelry returned to me as the rightful heir, and granted damages calculated at 3 times the original sale value based on the deliberate fraud and emotional harm inflicted. $40,500 plus legal costs. The automobile went first. The lending institution wasn't interested in sentimental explanations. Then the house went on the real estate market. My mother had always tied her personal worth to external appearances. Nice car in the driveway, carefully curated social media presence, perfect holiday photographs. Watching those symbols of status crumble wasn't sweet or triumphant. It was emotionally complicated. But consequences didn't stop at the legal system. Someone at the family gathering had posted a short video clip online. My mother's voice, bragging about shattering her daughter's fantasy for $13,500. It spread across social media faster than I'd anticipated. Neighbors recognized her. Coworkers did as well. Her employer, an office that advertised itself as family-centered and values-driven, called her in for a meeting. Shortly afterward, she lost her employment position. Bad for the company's image, they reportedly said. Kenneth filed for divorce within a month of the court judgment. In the separation agreement, he kept what was legally his and refused to co-sign any future loans or fresh start ventures. In one brutally honest line, he told her, "You taught me that if you'll sell out your own daughter, you'll sell out anyone." My grandmother rewrote her will, leaving everything she possessed, modest but hers, to me and my cousins, with one explicit clause. Christine was excluded permanently. Socially, my mother found herself on an island. Friends stopped returning her phone calls. The people who once laughed at her jokes now avoided eye contact when passing her in public. She had spent years controlling the narrative, painting herself as the underappreciated hero of every story. Now, people had heard her without any filter applied, and they believed what they'd heard. Throughout all of this, I experienced a twisted mixture of vindication and grief. My lawyer congratulated me on the victory. The buyer thanked me for doing the right thing, even returning the jewelry with a quiet apology for ever being involved in the situation. On paper, I'd won comprehensively, legally, financially, publicly, but standing in my bedroom holding the emerald necklace in my hands, I couldn't ignore the tight knot in my chest. When the person who betrayed you loses absolutely everything, money, house, marriage, reputation, are you supposed to feel satisfied? Or does real revenge always arrive with a little bit of collateral damage inside your own heart? Several months passed before my mother finally attempted to reach out. The messages started small, missed calls, a couple of text messages asking if we could quote 69. I ignored them initially. Then one afternoon, a longer message appeared. She wrote about how she was living in a tiny apartment now, how people whispered when she walked into the grocery store, how everyone had turned against her because of quote 70 quote. At the end, she wrote quote 71 quote. The thing was, I wasn't happy. I wasn't miserable either. I was freer. I had my own place, my own routines, therapy appointments circled on my calendar. The jewelry sat securely in a small safe, not on display, not worn around my neck. I wasn't ready to wear it yet. It felt like a relic from a simpler version of my life that no longer existed. I agreed to meet her at a cafe across town, neutral territory where neither of us could pretend we were back to normal family dynamics. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked somehow smaller. The confidence she'd worn like armor was visibly fractured. She attempted to smile. "Olivia," she said softly, "you look different." "So do you," I replied, sitting down across from her. There was an awkward stretch of silence before she launched into her prepared speech. "I've lost absolutely everything," she said, her voice trembling just enough to draw sympathy from anyone listening. "The house, the car, my job, my reputation. People look at me like I'm some kind of monster. Your grandmother cut me off completely. Kenneth left. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" I met her eyes directly. "Do you have any idea what it felt like for me?" I said. "To hear you talk about hurting me for entertainment? To watch you sell the last thing Grandma left me and turn it into a joke at the dinner table?" She flinched, but kept pushing forward. "Old habits die hard." "I was under enormous pressure," she insisted. "Bills, aging, everyone constantly judging me. I made a bad judgment call. But you dragged me through court proceedings. You turned the entire family against me. You let strangers online tear me apart. You destroyed your own mother." "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed the version of yourself I was trying so hard to love." She stared at me, angry tears building. "So what happens now?" she demanded. "Do you want me to beg? Is that what will finally satisfy you?" I don't want you to beg, I said. I wanted you to be someone I could actually trust. When you sold the jewelry, I thought the worst part was losing the heirloom. But then I heard you say that my pain was entertainment to you, that $13,500 was worth more than my trust. That's what I can't get past. For a moment, something resembling genuine regret flickered across her face. Maybe she was sorry for what she'd done. Maybe she was just sorry she'd been caught. I'm still your mother, she whispered. Blood is blood. I shook my head slowly. You taught me that blood isn't enough, I said. Family isn't who shares your DNA. It's who refuses to sell you out when it's convenient. It's who protects your pain instead of monetizing it. She looked away, jaw clenched, a tear finally slipping down her cheek. So that's it? She asked. You're cutting me off forever? I took a breath, feeling the weight of the answer. I'm not promising you forever or never, I said. I'm telling you this. I don't hate you. I'm not going to spend my life trying to hurt you back. But I also don't owe you access to me. Trust isn't a birthright. You spent years burning the bridge and expected me to keep rebuilding it. I'm done being the only one doing the work. We sat there in silence, two people connected by history, but separated by choices. After a while, I stood up. Take care of yourself, I said. I hope you learn from this. I really do. But I'm not going to set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. As I walked out of the cafe, the air felt strange, lighter, but edged with something bittersweet. Later that night, I finally opened the safe, took out the emerald necklace, and fastened it around my neck. I looked in the mirror and saw not just my grandmother's face reflected in my own features, but a woman who had chosen herself over inherited damage. After you've taken revenge, after the courts and the money and the public shame, one question still lingers. Does winning against the person who betrayed you ever truly make you happy? Or does real freedom come from finally accepting that sometimes the only way to protect your heart is to walk away from the people who broke it?